Welcome to Sparks of History, where Jewish history and world history meets. We are honored to have with us today Rabbi Dovid Kaplan, an acclaimed author, educator, and speaker. Rabbi Kaplan is a senior lecturer at Yeshiva Or Sameach in Jerusalem, where for decades he has inspired countless students. Rabbi Kaplan's early published works include the Or Sameach Gemara Companion and the Kiruv Files. In the 2000s, Rabbi Kaplan began writing a popular parenting column for Hamodia magazine, which led to the publication of a number of books, including Polishing Diamonds, Bringing Out the Sparkle in Our Children, Perfecting Diamonds, Bringing Out the Sparkle in Our Children as well. Since 2006, Rabbi Kaplan has authored 6 volumes in the Impact! Series, a collection of powerful and uplifting short stories. And today we are privileged to have Rabbi Kaplan with us to explore the deeper meaning of Purim and the Book of Esther. Rabbi Kaplan, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. If I would have known I'd get an introduction like that, I would have joined sooner.
There you go. Okay. Before we start Purim, obviously this is a difficult time for Yeshiva Or Sameach with the passing of the Rosh Yeshiva of Nota Schiller, blessed memories at Tzedek Ubracha, and would certainly, if you wanted to say a few words about the Rosh Yeshiva, please.
Yeah, Rabbi Schiller, this is very fitting for a history idea, because we always look at things with the historical perspective for Klal Yisrael. And since the early 70s, there's been a historical movement in Klal Yisrael, what they call the Kiruv movement, the outreach movement, with so many thousands of Balei Tshuva. And Rav Schiller was somebody who was, if not the number one, he was certainly one of the founders or movers of the pioneers of the Kiruv movement, and I knew him personally. We're very close, and Rav Schiller was somebody who, they use the expression Moser Nefesh. Moser Nefesh literally means to die al Kiddush Hashem. That's really what it means. In the vernacular, we use Moser Nefesh as giving up a lot of time and energy and kochos nefesh. And Rav Schiller was somebody who, he was constantly in Chutz La'aretz, constantly raising money, constantly what we use, say, Moser Nefesh for the cause. But on top of that, he was also a Talmid Chacham. He was also an educator, and just one of the most high caliber people that I've ever met in my life. And it's a big loss for our Sameach. He was an inspiration for us. He was somebody that we looked up to, and he was, to a certain extent, the person who was our, he was our leader when Mendel Weinbach was Nifter, his partner. We had only Rav Schiller, and that was you just felt that Daddy's still around. And now Daddy's not around. I think that's the feeling.
Thank you for those words. Appreciate it. To start off, we'll number these questions, so we'll keep it on track. Number one, given the alarming rise that we see today of anti-Semitism around the world, what was the reason behind Haman's hatred? Was it personal, political, theological? How do you explain it?
We look at everything through the lens of Torah, and the Torah says openly, Esav sonei Yaakov. And Esav hated Yaakov. One of the classic commentaries, the Abarbanel, says that they were born specifically as twins, because if there's going to be a rivalry, there's no more bitter rivalry than between brothers, especially twins. Normally they get along, but if they go to the bad, then it gets really, really, really ugly. And that's one of the reasons that Abarbanel explains Esav was born as a twin with Yaakov, for the express purpose that the descendants of Esav should have a built-in hatred of Yaakov, Esav son of Yaakov, that when we, the Jewish people, step out of line, they're there to prod us back into line. And unfortunately, that's been the pattern through history. And of all the haters, Amalek is the biggest hater of all. So by Haman, the political or personal or theological, all of those are only the excuse that brings out the latent hatred. And Haman would hate him anyway. And you see that we're going through that today. I mean, the people try to find anti-Semitism, cures for anti-Semitism. There is no cure for anti-Semitism. Let's call a spade a spade. There's no cure for anti-Semitism. It's always going to be there. And all the news and all even the state of Israel, which was meant to be the cure for anti-Semitism. And you could argue that there's even more anti-Semitism now than there's ever been before since the Holocaust. It's something that's always going to be there, and we just have to try to deal with it. We see that no matter what we try, there's a double standard in the world, and whether it's the United Nations or it's the European Union or whoever it is, there's always a double standard because we're Jewish, and that's the way it's going to be, and that's what was bothering Haman.
Number two, why was Haman so confident that he could wipe out the Jewish people, given, of course, he had this innate hatred? But why was he so confident? Did he see the Jewish people as being politically weak, morally compromised, or lacking divine protection?
The truth is that it doesn't really say in the commentaries why he was confident, other than the Gemara saying that the Gemara said that he implied the Jewish people are derelict in their duties as Jews, and somehow, and again, these are always very difficult things that Haman didn't learn Gemara, and Haman didn't, he didn't know the verses. Somewhere deep down, somewhere in his soul, there's a sense, and we find this in other areas where they sense it rather than be able to express it. And he just sensed, especially being that he was so powerful and so wealthy, and he could make this tremendous financial offer to Achashverosh. It was an exorbitant sum of money. So, like all anti-Semites through history, they just feel, Jewish people are not very, very powerful. We're all scattered all over the place with Fuzur and Mafura. So it would seem that he just felt, it's a mistake they all make because they'll never wipe us out. They'll never wipe us out. We have a promise that we're always going to exist. But sometimes they just feel, I guess, that we're vulnerable and he's powerful. Therefore, that's what I would guess. But it's not nothing more than a guess. Maybe an educated guess. I'm not sure.
We read number three. We read in the Book of Esther that Mordechai refused to bow down to Haman. What is the significance of that act? Was it correct? Obviously, Mordechai was a prophet. Was it correct? Is there any criticism of that? And how does this connect to the whole issue of Jewish resilience and standing up to the non-Jew?
It's a very important question. It's a very important message, because you see, if we were around at the time and we judge cause and effect, so we would say, well, Mordechai didn't bow down. That provoked Haman. Haman got upset, and there was he unleashed this decree on the Jewish people. That's certainly how I would have read it if I was around. And that is classic short-sightedness, because the Gemara says, the Talmud says, that the reason of Haman's decree was because they went to the festive, the party of Achashverosh 9 years earlier. Now, if somebody would ask you if something happened today, and it would ask you cause and effect, and you tell you, well, you know what? It's really because something happened 9 years ago. You think I'm crazy. But the lesson for us is Mordechai had good reason not to bow down to Haman, whether it was because Haman was wearing some sort of idol that Mordechai is not allowed to bow down to, or according to another opinion, that Mordechai had actually purchased Haman as a servant. The Gemara says that whatever reason he had to not bow down to Haman, he was right. And everybody read it a certain way, but you have to remember, Mordechai is a member of the Sanhedrin. And the lesson for us is that Torah leadership determines policy for Torah Jews. And only Torah leadership, the leading Torah, the Gedolei Hador, only they can interpret cause and effect. We look at it we small people look at it with short-sightedness. We think this is cause and effect. And we've been often missing the boat completely. And that's the lesson that really comes out of it, is that Mordechai is teaching us the Megillah story is teaching us, listen, I'll give you an example, if I may. Nowadays, there are many issues that are facing the Jewish people, whether it's financial issues because of tuitions, or whether it's the shidduch crisis, or whether it's women with the recalcitrant husbands who won't give their wives a get. People come up with various solutions for the problems. And often they fail, this happens all the time, they fail to take into account what new problems will it create. You'll solve one problem, but you may not solve the second. You'll create new problems. And how does that affect the Jewish people? And that's very often the short sightedness, whether it's people making suggestions on how yeshivas should be run, because there are problems. Yeshivas have certain problems. Well, they make suggestions. Well, what new problems will that create? And how do you know those new problems won't put us into a worse situation? The idea that, for example, to get around the problem of husbands not giving their wives a get, a divorce when they want the divorce. So make a prenuptial agreement, which may very well work from the raw letter of halacha. It may. But what new problems will that create? What will that do to the entire conscience? So you're right, there are a certain amount of women who are suffering in this way. And what will happen if they would do something like that, and that would undermine the entire stability of all marriages in across Klal Yisrael? So we'd have bigger problems. We'd have more problems. Those determinations could only be made by the Gedolei Hador, because they've got the foresight, they've got the understanding that we don't have. And that's the lesson for Mordechai not bowing down.
We see in the Book of Esther, Megillat Esther, that Mordechai instructs Esther to remain silent about her Jewish identity, of course, at least initially. What does that suggest about Jewish survival strategies in the exile, in the Gulut? Is it something we can learn from that, or is it just particular to that situation?
I don't really know of another case throughout the exiles that a girl was taken to become the queen. Now, I guess the closest we have is a Jewish daughter-in-law of the president, but we don't have a situation where quite like that. What the commentaries explain is that Mordechai, he saw that something was out of the ordinary here, that all of a sudden the Jewish girl somehow got selected. So he understands there's one of two things. Either she needs to get out of it because she's in a horrific situation, or she's been placed there for a reason because it's going to be a benefit to the Jewish people. He's not sure which one it is, but he kills two birds with one stone by telling her, don't say who you are. Because if she's meant to get out of it, that will be the ticket out. Because Achashverosh won't want to marry a girl who doesn't have any sort of pedigree, and he doesn't know who she is. And if it's meant to be the benefit of the Jewish people, some sort of salvation for some trouble that's coming, so then that's also a reason not to tell who you are. There is a lesson for us throughout Jewish history, which is be quiet. Not everything we're thinking needs to be said. We all know what we think about various solutions about what we should do in Gaza and what we would like to do in Gaza, what we would like to. We all know. Everybody's thinking to say. It's like the guy in the room, the kid in the room who says what everybody's thinking. I heard about this kid. There are two grandfathers, and the younger grandfather died before the older grandfather. So everybody was in the room sitting shiva. They're all maybe the family is all together, and the 7-year-old mutual grandson walks over to the remaining grandfather who was older, and he says to him, Zadie, we all thought you were going to die first. And so he's only saying what everybody, we don't need to say it. We know. And the more we talk, the worse off we are. And the more we talk, the worse off we are. There are a lot of things that since we can't do anything about it anyway, better not to say it. And I don't want to, I'm not going to mention names, obviously, but there are many Jewish, quote unquote, people who represent the Jewish people all over the place, in the media and all over the place. They just do a lot of talking, which only shoots us in the foot. It doesn't do any good. We always do much better quietly and behind the scenes.
How is it kept a secret?
What's that?
How is it kept a secret? I mean,
great question. So I'll tell you, I'll answer that question with another question. Esther, in all the children's books, if you ever the children's books on Purim, So they always have pictures, first of all, they always picture Achashverosh as this happy-go-lucky, roly-poly, and you almost think of, I think, Rabbi, I think you're old enough to remember, the Hogan's Heroes. The Germans are always depicted as a bunch of bumbling idiots where Klink and Schultz are bang heads together when they bend down to pick up a coin. Whatever the Germans were, they weren't bumbling idiots, number one. And Achashverosh and Haman are devious, cunning politicians. That's got to be clear. And in all the children's book, on the back page, there's always the second to the last page shows Haman and his sons are dangling by the nooses. And then on the back page, you always have Achashverosh and Mordechai and Esther are going, they're all waving and saying, like, But you should know that, for the Jewish people, it was Ora V'Simcha. For Esther and Mordechai on a personal level was a tragedy. They had to get divorced. Mordechai eventually goes to Eretz Yisrael. Esther has to stay and live with the Goy king. He has a child from him, Daryavesh. And for her, on a personal level, it's a tragedy. So I always wondered, in this tragedy, why is it that earlier in the Megillah it says both her parents died and Mordechai adopted her? But that also she has to go through. It's not enough. She had a rough time here. So I finally found an answer. I had that question for many years. I wondered about that. Why is that such a crucial factor? The answer to that question is with another question. How did they know she's Jewish? You got all these girls running around the palace, most of them with severe clothing allergies. And Esther you got this Jewish girl with a ponytail and a tear-drenched Tehillim in her hand. You don't know she's Jewish. You couldn't figure that out, that she's Jewish. You don't have to be that. The answer is everybody knew where did they get her from? They drove to Rehov Chazonish in Bnei Brak and pulled her out of the house of the Gadol Ador. Gee, I wonder what she is. She must be Jamaican. I mean, what could she possibly be? The answer is that everybody knew where she came from. And Mordechai said, listen, I saw this orphan girl wandering the streets and I took her in. In that way, they're able to keep it secret because Mordechai says, I don't know any better than you do. I know I raised her Jewish and I sent her to Beis Yaakov, but I don't know who she is. And that was already something Achashverosh wasn't willing, because who is she? I'm not going to marry some vagrant from the street. I don't know who she is. I want to know her pedigree. That's how they managed to keep it secret.
The whole Book of Esther, Megillah Esther, is full of parties and banquets and drinking. This is number 5. Why did Esther invite Haman to her banquet? What psychological or political strategy was she employing? And was this under the instructions of Mordechai, or did she also take an initiative here?
Interesting question. It doesn't say that it was Mordechai's instructions what she did. It says why she did it. The Gemara gives about 10 different reasons why she did it. She wanted to keep him close by in case she would come up with an idea of how to take him down. Or there's another opinion that she wanted Achashverosh to suspect there's some sort of some affair between them and he would kill both of them, in which case they would eradicate the decree. There are different reasons, about 10 different reasons the Gemara gives. And the Gemara then says in a remarkable statement, the Gemara says that one of the sages met Eliyahu Hanavi, because 10 different sages give opinions here, what she was thinking. And one of the sages asked Eliyahu Hanavi, and which one is right? And Eliyahu says all of them. She had all of it in mind. Whatever reason it was, strategically, it was a good idea to keep Haman nearby. She also didn't want the Jewish people to feel too confident that, well, we have that's our sister, that's a Jewess in the palace. The Jews all knew she's Jewish. And therefore we're in good shape because we got a Jewish lobby in Washington. So we're in great shape over here. She wanted the Jewish people to get nervous and start davening, because ultimately that's where the deliverance is going to come from. It's going to come through tefillah and fasting and tshuva.
Haman is executed. Number 6, Haman is executed. His 10 sons are all executed, all hung, and yet we see that the decree isn't eradicated. The decree remains. So why was it necessary for the Jews to fight back even after all this happened and Haman was executed? And does this tell us anything about Jewish self-defense throughout history?
The answer to the first part is that apparently, knowing these were the anti-Semites, these were the people who were the followers of Haman, the various Amalekites and followers of Haman throughout the kingdom. And the Jews had an opportunity now, because once Achashverosh gave them permission to fight, that means that all the militias were now behind the Jews, because they understood he couldn't take back the first decree. But if he's making a second decree, everybody understands which is the priority over here, which one he's really behind. So they had that. It seems they had the opportunities. They're anti-Semites, and it's time to knock them off. Again, it's got to be ratified by the Torah leaders, but that would seem to be why they did it under the circumstances. They had the opportunity. So let's clean it out a little bit. On the other hand, what to do to Jewish history? Again, self-defense. If we're attacked, we have to defend ourselves. There's no question. We always have to defend ourselves, whether it's on a personal level or a national level. How that defensive structure should look and what it should be and when it should go perhaps on a preemptive attack, all of that, we're not in the situation. We need a Sanhedrin. I remember on October 7th, when the negotiations first started. So one of the Gedolim said, there are decisions that the Israeli government is making here about with people's lives. We should negotiate, not negotiate, how to get them back. You need a Sanhedrin for these things. These are not things that we could, we all have certain feelings about it, but what are our feelings worth? It requires Das Torah. And that's all through Jewish history. It requires Das Torah to know when, if, and when.
The Book of Esther, number 7, the Book of Esther does not mention explicitly God's name, its absence. What does this teach us about divine providence, השגחה, פרטית? What do we learn from the absence of God's name?
So it's interesting because we have two rabbinic holidays. We have Purim and we have Hanukkah. Now you notice the requirements on Hanukkah, we're supposed to add a candle every night. If you didn't add a candle each night, you still fulfill the obligation. And there's Mahadrin, Mina Mahadrin. There's the optimum way to do the mitzvah. There's the secondary way to do the mitzvah, but either way you fulfill your obligation. Purim, we have to read the Megillah, and we have to hear every single word. And one word that a person misses during the Megillah and they've not fulfilled their obligation, they have to hear the Megillah again. It's rough, and twice over Purim. Twice we have to do that. So the explanation is that on Hanukkah, nobody's going to make a mistake and think that oil, which objectively is only enough for one night and it burns for 8 days, nobody's going to think that that's a natural occurrence. Everybody's going to see the hand of God. It's beyond nature. Purim is a series of coincidences, one coincidence after another coincidence after another coincidence, and it would be very easy for us to make a mistake and think that the world is running based on natural law, just coincidences. So God's name is left out of the Megillah in order for us to understand that even when we don't see God openly with blatant miracles, that he's behind the entire thing. And that this series of coincidences, although it can be explained naturally, are beyond mathematical probability, and it has to be a miracle. And that's a big test for us. It's a very big test for us to see God's hand in the natural world. The example I always use is the 6-Day War, where the Israeli Air Force knocked out the Egyptian and the Syrian Air Force while they're on the ground on the first day of the war. Okay, they have a better Air Force, better intelligence. That begs the question, why? They were only in existence 19 years at the time, and the other countries were in existence long before. Why did they develop a better Air Force and a better intelligence system? And when is the last time or the next time in the history of war that such a thing has happened? So it looks like it's very natural. There's nothing supernatural about it. The planes didn't all of a sudden disintegrate or disappear. They were bombed. But why did it happen? And that's our challenge, is to be able to see the hand of God within nature.
So if just a little bit more here, if God's name was in the Megillah, what would that have shown us? Like how would it have had that been presented? Like what would it have said? That God told Mordechai to do this?
Yeah, we would see it as another one, like the biblical Hashem, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe lemor. You know, Hashem is involved, but when Hashem is not, we don't see Hashem at all. So we're on our own, type of thing. And this way, Hashem's name doesn't appear anywhere. Hashem's name doesn't appear anywhere. And, which is interesting, because you notice in the Haggadah of Pesach, Moshe Rabbeinu's name doesn't appear, for exactly the opposite reason. That in the Pesach Haggadah, we shouldn't describe it to Moshe Rabbeinu. We should understand that it's all coming from Hashem, and it was all miracles beyond nature.
The Purim story reflects the Jewish concept of the nafochu. Everything was turned down. Why did that have to be the Purim pathway? And how do we see this concept in our personal and national experiences?
I think that it's the answer is that every single one of us has been in situations in life where we've had some sort of challenge or ordeal, and we do not see our way out. All avenues have been blocked off. Whatever we've tried doesn't work. And then out of the clear blue, all of a sudden, somehow, we're out of the problem. A guy could be unemployed and he tries here, he tries there, he tries. Everything he's tried doesn't work. Then one Friday he's at the mikveh and a guy taps him on the shoulder and says, "By the way, I overheard you mention somebody that you're an accountant. My brother-in-law is looking for somebody in his firm." Out of the clear blue. And we see this probably more than anywhere else when it comes to shidduchim, where people try, they call this, they constantly. I know of a case of a young lady whose mother was a shadchan who had been networked with all the shadchanim across the globe. And they tried every night calling, doing, and then one day the mother and daughter went fruit and vegetable shopping. In the meantime, the neighbor across the street, the aunt of the neighbor across the street, was visiting in the city. And she decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, and she got hungry and decided to go buy an apple. So she walked into Pete's fruit shop, and sure enough, the mother and daughter, who's now 25 years old, walked into the fruit shop. And she took one look at the daughter, and she said she'd be great for my nephew Chaim, and 2 weeks later, they were engaged. Beautiful. And we see this in many areas of life. Sometimes when it comes to health issues, when it comes to trouble with children, sometimes a kid is struggling with his Yiddishkeit, and the parents have tried everything and nothing is working. And also the kid meets some guy one day, and the next thing you know, the kid has a complete change of attitude. So I think that the v'nahafochu is the lesson for us to never give up hope. Never give up hope. There's always hope. And most of the time, I always tell the students in the yeshiva, almost anything I could think of that has turned out well for me in life is because I didn't interfere with the Ribbono Shalom too much. And anything that hasn't worked is because I did interfere with him. So we just, let him run his world. And there's been a hafochu. He's got lots of, he's very resourceful. Much more than us.
Thank God. The concept of mida keneged mida, measure for measure, number 9, how does that concept play out in the Book of Esther?
Mida keneged mida. In the Book of Esther, it's interesting. I never thought about that. Not sure where we see the mida keneged mida here. That I'd have to think about exactly which is where the mida keneged mida is. I don't have offhand, I can't think of anything. I don't even remember the commentaries talking about that. Normally, the Gemara says everything Hashem does is mida keneged mida. One of the midas keneged mida is obviously the Jewish people who got involved with the party, so that triggered off. That was the backlash. But it doesn't. The precise mida keneged mida there, I'd have to think about.
Okay. Drinking on Purim. number 10. It's a big thing, drinking on Purim. It's almost for some, it's a rite of passage, so to speak. The first time, your child, your still children, get drunk. But what is the spiritual, mystical significance behind the Purim drinking custom, and how does it relate to all the hidden miracles of the Book of
Very,
Esther?
very important. It's very important that people get a handle on this because it's often misunderstood. First of all, it's a requirement no different than any other rabbinic requirement. However, it's a requirement with built-in safety measures. That means if a person is going to drink and is going to become his behavior will become inappropriate, then he shouldn't drink. But since it was a physical deliverance for the Jewish people, it requires a physical celebration. Whereas Hanukkah, which is a spiritual deliverance, because the Jews would have survived, it's just that Judaism was under attack. So then it's not a physical celebration. This is a physical threat to the existence of the Jewish people. So we celebrate it in a very physical, we have to eat and drink, and we have to celebrate, and there's Mishloach Manos, which creates an environment on Purim, an environment of happiness and joy. There are deeper reasons over here. One of which is that we understand that in the course of the year, a person does not necessarily know what in his trying to grow as a Jew, which we are all trying to do. We're all trying to grow. How much of it have I internalized? How much of it has really become part of me in the course of a year? So it used to be that Jews didn't do much drinking. Nowadays, unfortunately, things have changed drastically. But what Purim used to be is the day of release, where one is then able to access what has become real, because how do I behave when I'm drunk? How do I behave when I'm slightly inebriated? When my inhibitions are released, what's coming out now? Am I talking about how much I love doing chesed? Am I talking about I wish I could study more Torah? That means that it's in my consciousness. If a person gets drunk and behaves like a fool, so then you could gauge that perhaps less has been internalized. So the basic reason is celebration. Let me tell you, I'll end with a story here. There was a family in the Holocaust. There were 24 members of the family who were separated in the course of 5 years in various camps. At the end of the war, the family started regrouping. And they found the father, and they found the sister, and then they found the cousin. The entire family of 24 people, they all survived the war. And they got together on the day that they survived the war. They got together, they made a family celebration. They got together, and every year on the anniversary of that survival day, when they found all members were found to be alive, they specified a date, and they made a celebration on that day. Can you imagine what that celebration looked like? I guarantee you not one mother there was telling a kid, no, you had too much sugar today. And not one wife said to her husband, you drank a little too much. They're giddy with joy and happiness. So the story is unfortunately not real. The story is an analogy, because that family is the entire Jewish people. That was us on Purim. None of us would be here if Haman's decree would have come out, and we all survived it. And therefore we have that giddy celebration on Purim. We're giddy with delight that we managed to survive this decree. And therefore Purim, somebody was once complaining to my wife about Purim, the boys are getting drunk and the men are going on. And my wife turned to me after the lady, my wife said, wait, a person could complain about Purim too? We haven't got enough to complain about. Even Purim we could complain about. And that should be the attitude going into Purim. Yes, people will go overboard a little bit. I got news for you. If you go out to the rest of the world and watch how they go overboard and how we go overboard, we're still doing pretty well. And we could cut ourselves a little bit of slack one day a year that we have a little bit that maybe, you know, the boys, especially yeshiva boys, who are so restricted and restrained in the course of a year, and there's one day that they get quote unquote a little bit naughty. That's okay. That's okay. That's the joy of the Jewish people, and nobody should go into Purim with any sort of sour. What do you call it? Purim is a day of celebration, and it's something to be enjoyed and savored. Here in Yerushalayim, we have a 3-day Purim. Oh boys, they're going to be joy and savoring here, but it's a 3-day of Purim Mishulash, and we just hope we use Purim as a day and daven. You know, it says in the Megillah that Haman, Zeresh said to Haman, "Go tell the king to hang Mordechai." Now you stop and think about it. You don't tell kings what to do. You ask kings what to do. So I heard part of that is an allusion to the idea that on Purim is a day where we can tell the king what we need through tefillah. That's a day that we could daven and ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for anything that we need. And hopefully we'll daven well, and we'll celebrate well, and it'll be like Yehudim Ma'isa Orah V'Simcha.
That note, Rabbi Kaplan, thank you so much for your insights and wisdom today. We appreciate it very much. And as you said, this Purim should be a wonderful Purim and should bring a Yeshua, a salvation to us.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm honored. Thank you very much, Rabbi.